When it comes to quests in Odyssey, there are a metric fuck ton. There are so many quests, from main story missions, to bounties, to timed event quests, and more. But I discussed the story already, so what about the side quests? With the sheer volume of them, they are bound to wildly vary in quality, but they are the main source of getting experience to level up. So, you will be doing a lot of them, and honestly, they're a bit lackluster. The majority of side quests are very straightforward. Go kill this person, go save this person, go get this thing for somebody. There isn't a whole lot of depth to them. One thing we do need to remember about questing is the difference between guided and exploration mode. Exploration mode turns off quest markers. It means you need to explore the world yourself in order to complete quests. Quest givers will often provide necessary information in order for you to find the items, but everything is still up to you. Personally, I use the guided system with quest markers on. It certainly feels like the developers wanted you to play the game in exploration mode because everybody gives you options for directions regardless. I can't personally be bothered to explore like that, but it's never a bad thing to give players more options to play the game. Unfortunately, as I said, the quests themselves are very dull. Going straight to a quest marker or exploring the world doesn't change a boring conversation of somebody telling you to just grab something. I suppose one might be able to argue they aren't meant to be full of depth, as the main story should have the depth instead. It's just not a whole lot happens when doing side quests. I always feel like I'm in it simply for the experience, nothing more. I guess that it is a bit fitting though, as we are a mercenary. I appreciate it when there's an in-game explanation as to why I'm doing all this stuff, even if it feels mundane to do. We gotta pay the bills somehow, so I guess we're gonna have to take a few of these jobs. Don't get me wrong though, I'm not saying this is a major flaw with the game. I would have liked to see a bit more depth to it, but they are side content. There are a lot of side quests you don't need to bother with. It likely feels worse than it is because of the serious issue with leveling. There are a few things we need to understand about leveling in Odyssey. The first of which is experience is clearly throttled. This isn't just a possibility, it is extremely noticeable during the game. At many points, especially in the early game, your progress will grind to a halt out of nowhere because you aren't getting enough experience. You will be forced to do random shit until you catch up to the level of the quest. Of course, I don't have physical proof, but I don't think it's a stretch to assume it's all due to the in-game shop. For some reason, Odyssey has microtransactions. Origins did as well, but it wasn't as noticeable since the experience wasn't throttled. Or at least if it wasn't anywhere nearly as bad. Odyssey's microtransactions offer all sorts of gear and items, but the most notable is the experience boost. You can purchase a permanent experience boost. With how badly the experience is throttled, it can be surmised that it was done on purpose to sell boosts. I don't want to get into a full-blown discussion on microtransactions as a topic by themselves. However, in this case, it seriously damaged the gameplay experience. The other thing that impacts leveling is a system that was introduced in Origins. You had an option that could be turned on and off to automatically scale enemy levels. This option lets you make the world scale with your level, so old areas would still be dangerous. Note, this was a choice. In Odyssey, this is permanent. You cannot turn this off. All enemies scale with your level, so old zones will always have enemies near your level. When this is a choice, it can be a nice personal challenge, but it does present a complication to progression. In an RPG, which Odyssey tries so hard to be, your progression is very important. The progression of power, to be more specific. Your character needs to become more powerful as time goes on. But if all the enemies constantly scale in essentially lower level zones, your sense of progress is fucked with. It becomes extremely hard to tell that you've gotten stronger. You level up, gear up, and get talents to become stronger. But when you can't tell that you've gotten stronger, even after leveling and gearing your character, the sense of progression is halted. This ends up damaging the overall experience. I should make a quick note about the talent options here. I mentioned that fully upgraded abilities are often absurd and over the top. While these abilities could give a sense of extreme power, as if you have become stronger, the change is extremely sudden. 1 second, you are disarming an opponent of their shield. The next, the shield explodes in a flash of light. There is no in between. You don't build up to it, so it certainly doesn't help your sense of progression, and if anything, makes the situation worse. Lastly, on top of the experience throttling, occasionally quests will spike in level requirement. For some reason, out of nowhere, your main story quest will suddenly require multiple levels higher than you currently are. When first getting to Athens, one of the main quests I received was to kill a poisoner with a bunch of snakes around him. But the quest is 3 levels higher than me when I get to Athens. That means I need to grind side quests and other random things just to progress. The most egregious moment that this happens is after you find your mother, Marini. She tells us to meet her in Sparta after meeting her father in Atlantis. You get the quest to meet her, but it is in the level 30 range, while the previous quest is around level 23. Why does it spike in level? Why do I get it so soon if I can't do it? Who designed this? One thing I noticed as well is the arbitrary amount of experience you get. While the most efficient way of getting experience is quests, you get tiny amounts of experience for all sorts of things, like completing area objectives or killing enemies. But there seems to be no rhyme or reason as to how much experience you get. As you get to the higher levels, the numbers just skyrocket into absurdity. I don't even know how much experience is required for a level, so these numbers don't mean a whole lot. It could say 1 experience, or 5 billion. If it fills up the bar just the same, what's the difference? What's it matter? This is a bit of a nitpick, as it doesn't really affect what you do, but one thing I appreciated from Origins is the clarity from your actions. Assassinating enemies, completing objectives, and quests give a set amount of experience. Quests even tell you how much experience you'll get, which lets you decide what might be best to do at the moment to level up. I'd like to briefly touch upon the world design in relation to questing. Now, the design of Greece and its many islands is not what I'm referring to. See, every zone has an initial level requirement. This isn't an uncommon thing to do, and differs the high-level areas with tougher enemies and challenges to the low-level ones. However, the level scaling of old zones creates a strange situation, where enemies need to be extremely basic and simplistic in design. As I mentioned in a previous section, enemy difficulty is just a percentage increase to their stats for the most part. So, then what is the point of gaining zones? It ends up only aiding to the rigid linearity of the story. There is nothing stopping you from running all over the world, but higher level areas are void of content until you reach the appropriate level. You certainly won't have any quests, and you won't be able to fight most enemies. The scaling system would have been much more appropriately used to make the entire world scale with you. That way the world would be really open. You could go wherever, whenever. We would still have an issue with the sense of progression, but it would be an improvement at the very least. The questing and leveling experience ends up being very poor for what it could have been. The experience throttling and awkward scaling systems create a poor experience overall. This, paired with how lackluster the side quests are, makes leveling up feel like a chore more than a reward. The sheer volume of side quests and extra activities is staggering, but it doesn't make up for poor design. When looking at the world itself, it is absolutely stunning. The recreated world of ancient Greece is just gorgeous. The land of Greece is filled with color and life. Meanwhile, the architecture of the ancient Greeks is a great parallel to the lush landscapes. The time and effort into recreating what Greece would have looked like back then is apparent. Any synchronization point provides a great spot to appreciate the beautiful world. The developers did an amazing job on the visuals in Odyssey. I wish I could leave it at that, but there are a couple things that need to be mentioned. The map is pretty big, and a large portion of this world, at least half, is simply just water. You will be traversing to many islands in the world by boat, but during that trip, there's almost nothing there. It's hard to appreciate the great work the developers put into everything else when I'm traveling such long distances by water, where you look at water. Even when on land, though, traversing the world requires almost no thought. Cassandra can climb almost any surface. You can run in a straight line and hop over almost any obstacle and get to where you need to go without looking where you are even going. This is made even worse when we remember that for most of the game, we don't take any fall damage. So not only can I climb any object, but I can simply jump off those same objects without any worry. Why take a road around the mountain, taking in the scenery, when I can just hop off the mountain instead? In terms of visuals, the developers did such a fantastic job that it's disappointing how easy it is to miss all of it. Then there's also synchronization points. You can appreciate the visuals from these points, but they're very strangely placed. These points are also used as fast travel locations, but have the most inconsistent placement. Large stretched out areas often have few points to travel to. This does help me traverse and appreciate the visuals, but then at the same time, many tiny islands have several points shoved really close together. In the spots where you really don't need them, there's an abundance of them. But where you could easily get away with adding a few more, there are less. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But when it comes down to it, this is exactly what I was talking about in my section on characters. It is apparent that time and effort was put into the visuals of Odyssey. While it is unfortunate that a few things detract from the appreciation of that effort, the effort is still noticeable. I never saw any outstanding bugs or disparities through the game or any of the DLCs. I am glad the myriad of stuff in Odyssey did not detract from the time they put into building this world. Well, here we are. We have reached the end of this particular journey. We've traveled across ancient Greece, seen mythical creatures, battled an evil cult, and even seen the lost city of Atlantis. But after everything that's been covered, what can we really say about the quality of Assassin's Creed Odyssey? The game is most certainly bold. It implements a ton of new ideas, while also trying to expand upon the mechanics present in Origins. However, as interesting as those ideas were, and the great potential they had, most of it fell short. From the very start, the game wants you to create your own grand story, your own Odyssey. It wants you to make choices that impact not only you, but the people you meet along the way. It wants your choices to have weight to them, but it also wanted to tell a very specific story in a specific way, which takes precedent over the player's choices, leading to them being hollow. This is on top of the absurdly horrendous writing in the Atlantis DLC. The characters in the game had potential for so much depth, but instead were planks of wood, simply moving in the way the story needed them to. The mercenaries had potential to give real consequence to your actions in the world, but ended up being an afterthought that you could pay off at any moment. Conquest battles had potential to be grand arenas with tons of fighting and be a place to really test your combat skills, but devolved into just smacking a bunch of people around for a while. The level scaling had potential to make a truly open world and give the player complete freedom, but ended up being completely restricted to a linear path. I could go on, but I think there's just one word that is needed to sum it all up: disappointing. The sheer volume of potential that Odyssey had is staggering, but it's just squandered. I was originally very excited to see how it would expand upon what Origins did, but the game succeeds at almost nothing it sets out to do. This is my second full playthrough of the game, totaling in over 150 hours of gameplay. Throughout this project, my aim was to provide analysis and discussion towards the game without personal bias. While I made my opinions and feelings known at many points, my conclusion is separate from my feelings. As I stated in the beginning, the game should hold up on its own merits, on what it has to offer. In the end, we can conclude that Assassin's Creed Odyssey is, objectively, a poorly made game. I tried my best to be as accurate as possible, providing examples of what I was talking about, along with relevant visuals at any chance I could. There are also some areas of the game I intentionally left out of the critique. I left out many things like voice acting, which I don't believe had enough impact on the overall experience to talk about. Other areas, like musical composition, I felt were too subjective, and that I'd end up being biased in that particular area. But I also want to be clear that I don't claim to be perfect by any means. I am still a novice at this sort of thing. This series of videos has been extremely difficult to make and taken up quite a lot of time. My purpose with all of these videos is to hopefully create or add something new to discussions about these games. But anyway, I hope anybody who would possibly be watching this at least enjoyed the ride. That concludes this video, and my critique of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Thank you for watching, and I guess I'll see you next time.